Namaste, my beautiful co-creators. I'm Isolde Kellerman, and welcome to Journey of Awe. We're an interactive web TV where we bring you the latest teaching, education, and programs to illuminate the collective consciousness. We have a very different setup today since I am here with Dr. Angela Barnett, who has the doctorate at intercultural communication and multicultural communication. So it's a very fascinating topic because your education took you beyond what we perceive to be multicultural communication. So welcome to the show. Please tell us about yourself.
Thank you. So my doctorate is in multinational communication, but my master's degree was in intercultural communication. And when I was studying in these fields, it was very interesting. I was always very interested in why it seemed like people didn't agree with each other and why people couldn't see what I could see and I didn't exactly agree what they saw. And I was always interested in mainly understanding my own family because it felt like I lived in a totally different universe than they did. They didn't understand what I was talking about, and I never understood what they were talking about. Mm-hmm. And so the differences in communication and understanding each other begin from individual to individual. And even though I started studying multicultural communication and how people communicated differently in other culture, it always came down to individual to individual. And I started teaching in Korea. I started teaching English in Korea, which is such a different culture than America. My first experience in Korea, I think it's going to be the most important experience in understanding what's going to happen when spaceships start landing and there's these entities from not just other cultures, from other star systems on this planet. When I was living in Korea, I would be taking walks, and like one time I remember walking over this bridge, and then there was these Koreans walking towards me, and I was looking right at them and trying to stay out of their pathway. They would like run right into me, almost knock me over, and it just seemed like they didn't know I was there. And this happened to me over and over again in Korea. And this was in 1981. So Korea has changed drastically since then. Yes. And this was South Korea, not
You know, it's
Korea.
interesting. So what you're saying, that they did not see you. So they did not perceive you because they did not.
I was not in their reality. I was not in their background knowledge. I was not in their field of awareness. I was not in their consciousness. And so this is the exact same thing that's going on now. The entities that are coming to Earth now are not in our consciousness. The reason that we can't perceive them is because they are not in our consciousness. So we have to expand our consciousness to start realizing that entities from other galaxies, entities from other universes, that universal consciousness has to come into our consciousness for us to perceive them.
Yes.
So there will be people that are perceiving these entities, and they're standing right in front of you talking to you, and another person would walk in the room and say who you're talking to because they can't see them.
Yes.
And so this was the same experience that I had in Korea. And then to verify that experience, it wasn't just that people were rudely running into me. One time I was in downtown Seoul, and there was this Korean with me, and there was this other Korean that had just bumped into me, and I turned to this man, because I could tell that he could speak English, and I said, "That person really couldn't see me, could she?" And he said, "Yes, you're right. Koreans cannot perceive Americans. You are totally out of our realm of consciousness. We are a very family-oriented culture that has been on this island, and we have our background knowledge, our reality system of what is here, and you're just not in our reality yet, and we just don't perceive of you. And but this was only Koreans that had
That native
never seen
someone
Americans
that
before.
didn't look like them.
Right.
Interesting, because that actually been in recording history many times, and one of the main events of that someone cannot perceive out of their level of consciousness is when the first Spaniards arrived to America, and the natives could not see the ships, and only the shaman could, because the shaman had a different perspective. So that's really interesting that different dimensions are around us, and we cannot perceive them because we have a filter built into us.
And now we have ships landing again, and some people see them and some people don't. And some people are taking pictures of these spaceships coming to Earth, and some people, even the people taking the spaceships, are just saying, no, I can't believe it's a spaceship. They're saying, it looks like a spaceship, but nah, I don't believe that. So, there's these weird people out there that think there's these spaceships landing, but no, I don't believe that. And these are people that actually took the picture, and they still don't believe it.
So tell me, how did you, what brought you into kind of switching gears to take your education a little bit to a different level? Well, than just among humans.
Yeah, I was always that way. I just never agreed with anything that other people perceived to be true. When I started teaching English in Korea, the first thing that I saw was the textbooks used for teaching English are like showing things like, how would you ask to get on the subway in New York? Now, here I am in Korea, where these people can't even see an American, but they're going to make them learn English about living in New York City and how to get on a subway in New York City. And I said, that is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. You're going to make me use this textbook to teach English to these people about something that they have no background knowledge. So I really developed my master's degree about proving you cannot teach a language to a person based on using background knowledge that is not in their background knowledge. So my thesis was not like in teaching the English language, it was proving that you have to relate to the background knowledge of the person you're talking to, or they're not going to understand what you're talking about. And that's true with people in your own culture, in your own family, any situation. If the person doesn't have the background knowledge of what you're talking about, they're not really listening to you. Every word that you say, they're putting a different meaning onto that word. And then they're going to change the subject. And you said, well, yeah, I was talking to that guy about that, but I knew he didn't know what he said. And I've had that happen to me over and over and over again. And it is true in talking to people in the same language, the same culture. And what was fascinating about living in Asia, I spent about 7 years in Korea and 6 years in Japan, and with some other Asian groups too. But in the Asian cultures, their communication is so much more about the knowing and the kind of a telepathic communication and feeling at the gut level and knowing. And what's interesting to me about that is the same formula that we have been giving now for returning to connecting to our higher self, to our soul level and oversoul level, because we were cut off at the third chakra so that we were not connecting up to the 7th through 15th level. We are tuned into this 5-dimensional perception of 5 senses. We can see, feel, touch, and we believe that perception of that material reality is the only one, that physical, but we're not in tune with the invisible, the knowing. But the Asians are much more in tune with that. that knowingness than the Western civilizations are. And I enjoyed that very much. I enjoy that feeling of people just kind of sensing and knowing what you're about, and not so much chit chat, but just kind of a feeling, just like to sit down and just having a cup of tea and just feeling each other,
just
yes, knowing how you feel. And we never do that in America. And
we rely too much on the language.
Yeah, we think it's all. We think as soon as we stop talking, we've lost the person's attention, and that's just not true in Asia. It's more about the silence. It's more about feeling you feel, and I love that. And that shows that the Asians have taken a big step forward towards this new reality that's coming, where we have to get in tune with that knowingness to meet these starry families that are returning to Earth, because they're first going to appear to us as light images and etheric bodies, and we're going to have to get more and more into that knowingness and feeling who they are. So this interdimensional communication. So I have gone from intercultural communication to multicultural communication to multinational communication, and I always knew that this paradigm shift that they talked about in the communication departments, the first time I heard that word paradigm shift, it just like turned me on. I just felt like, yeah, the paradigm shift of going beyond cultures and beyond belief systems and beyond languages, I just knew it meant something spiritual. I knew it meant like ascending, going to a different level. To me, that's what that word meant to me the first time I heard it. And so when they started talking about going beyond cultural beliefs, and I started seeing how they were teaching that in schools, and they were doing cross-cultural education. And because I started by living overseas and learning how to communicate with people, I was in the real situation, and then coming back to America and seeing how that was taught, the way it was being taught in the school systems, didn't make any sense at all to me. It was just like totally disconnected from reality. And some of the things they said in intercultural books too, this was something I thought was very funny when I first looked at an American book on intercultural studies. One of the things they were saying in those days, back in the 1990s, was that the reason that the Japanese got along so well and that they had this group culture was something about their culture was so small, and they would like get on these elevators and be together and have this one mind. There was these strange ideas being taught in these textbooks. I said, what are these people talking about?
Well, I think they perceive their culture from their level of consciousness, which they could not relate to.
So that's the problem. Our books are written from the background knowledge of Americans trying to teach this intercultural communication and cultural studies, and they've never been on the other side.
Yes.
And so when I was trying to teach in these classrooms in America, I just had to throw out the textbooks, and I would always teach my classes without their textbooks and using my own personal experiences and stuff, and school boards don't like that kind of thing.
So tell me, so you started in education and looking at, and you developed your own mystery school and your own way of teaching English, probably even prior to that.
Right.
So what is the biggest misconception, I guess, of education? Where do they fail? Because the way I see it is that we try to fill our youngsters' mind with white noise, just chatter, really making the left side of the brain very busy, so the right side could not truly develop, which is the inspiration, the visualization, the artistic side, where we could really think and dream our reality to be what we want it to be. So what is the meaning behind that? Why do they push the left, all this logical sense? Why do they try to teach our youngsters and keep their mind so busy on the left side and not allowing the right side to develop?
We can understand more about our present system if we look back to the problems of the galaxy and the cosmos and the universe. This problem has been going on for millions of years, and it's based on these fallen angelic groups that have been taking over our planet and taking over our galaxy, and all of these fallen angelic wars of control. And that control element comes from the original breakoff from Source. The angelic consciousness, those who remain in the angelic race line, always had the energy of Source, always had the mind of Source, always had the knowing of Source, and they had this magical power that after a fallen angelic, after they had fallen from the consciousness of Source, a fallen angelic has no source of energy, has no source of intelligence. So the only place they can get their energy and intelligence is from an angelic being. And so we have this earth, which is an angelic, the human angelic race line was here. And so it was a very coveted place. These fallen angelics wanted to have our consciousness as a source of their energy. Mm-hmm. So they've always been preying off of our energy, and they've always needed to control us. And this has gone back about 50,000 years back, when the Anunnaki resistance decided to use this planet, decided to have people as their slaves just to harvest gold for them so they could take it back to their planet as a source of energy. So they were using our gold as their source of energy. So there's been a lot of gold disappearing from this planet that nobody's telling us about, and probably replacing it with false gold that we don't even know it's false gold. But our gold has been harvested from this planet for thousands of years. So they wanted our gold as a source of energy, and they wanted our consciousness as a source of energy, our frequencies. So they've been plugging into us and using us, controlling us, and they never wanted us to learn who we really are. They never wanted us to learn that we have the mind of God. And so this system was set up through religions and education and government, everything to make sure we remained under their feet so they could continue to control us. So this goes way beyond our present governments. It goes to the governments of these fallen angelic councils controlling our government, the minds. They've been controlling the minds of the government. They've been controlling, they're the ones that create wars through frequencies sent interdimensionally through the earth that affects consciousness. They're able to use these frequencies, creating these earthquakes and all of these problems. This global warming has all been created through these miasms put in the seals of the earth over the years. So there's a lot of outside control of our minds and our systems that we're not aware of. It's all going on at a much higher level. And something I learned when I was studying education, there is a man, Mr. Gatto, who was the original creator of homeschooling. Mm-hmm. Because at one time he was a teacher just like I was, and he was in these school systems, and he was seeing the same thing that I saw. And he saw that everything in the classroom was just to make the students stupider. It's just like you give them this information, but the way it's done is in a way just to always teach to the lowest level student in the classroom, so those with more intelligence couldn't grow, and they didn't want the lowest level student to grow as smart as the others. And I remember one of the first things he said in his class book, his book that he wrote, his first day in the classroom, they told him he had to arrange the chairs in a certain way for the students to sit in. And then an administrator would come in every few days and say, no, your chairs are in the wrong order, and he'd have to rearrange the chairs. And he said that it would make them spend more time rearranging the chairs in the classroom than giving him time to teach. That was just one of his first remarks. And something that I learned, my last time that I taught in America, which was about 5 years ago, and I said, forget it, I'm never doing this again. I was teaching communication, how to write a good paper, how to communicate, the best way to structure your paper and organize your paper. And they have these rules through the education department of writing rules, how to format a paragraph, where your periods go and your semicolons go, and all these rules. And every one of these little things, you can't put a comma here, but you can put a comma here. Your paragraph has to do this and this. So they have these books that have these rules in them, and a teacher has to study these rules and teach these rules in the classroom. So I would teach these rules like for a semester, and then the next semester they would give me a different book with a different set of rules. They would change the rules. So those students that would learn the rules one semester, the next semester they'd get their papers marked wrong because they weren't following the rules that were given in the next semester. And they did that 4 semesters in a row, changed the rules, and it was a total waste of time. So teaching students how to write an incorrect paper.
You're teaching them how to follow the rules.
And which will be incorrect by the next semester.
Which doesn't allow really the creative side to come out.
And I got so involved with those rules that at the time I taught that class for a year, I couldn't write anything ever again. My mind was so confused. I said, well, was that what they said, or was that? No, they changed that. First it was that, and then it was that. And that's what they want to do to us. They know who we really are. They know that we can reconnect with the mind of God and have this infinite intelligence and have this eternal life. They know it, and they want to make sure we never figure it out. And they know as long as they keep us working 8 hours a day and having to get more education, struggling and never make enough money, and always arrange things that we still don't have enough money. And right when they think we have everything, they pull it out from under us because they are scared to death of us. We are the angelics. They are the fallen angelics. We're the ones with the source of information, the source of energy. We are the ones with the intelligence. And they just want to make sure we never figure it out. That's what it's all about. That's the game. And another thing I learned from Gatto's book, and his books are incredible. He has one of it's called Dumbing Us Down. He did a lot of research, same research I did in education. The reason I got a doctorate in education, my doctorate was in education, multi-national communication, global management training, but overall, the education done throughout the world. I went around the world and taught in school systems all over the world and saw that they were doing the exact same thing in every system in the world. Doing education was just to manipulate people into doing what that control system in that country wanted them to do. And they're trained to look at any other country and say, well, you do everything wrong. Because what my book says is correct, which means what your book says is incorrect. And so every book is incorrect, because if you look at it from any outsider's point of view, you'll say, that's ridiculous.
Yes, and what I noticed that the curriculum for children definitely been raised and the standard throughout the years. It's fascinating that when I look back what my mom was telling me when she was going to school, how simple it was, how they allowed to really learn the basics for years to come. And she still can remember homes that, because they were allowed to really enjoy studying. It was a slow process. Now look at education today. they rush the children through so much, and they have such a high standard for them to catch up. Even the teachers say that, how can we put it in? It's impossible. Although the standard is growing, the size of the human brain is not growing. So it's the same size as it was 60 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 40 years ago. But making or raising the standard, or wanting more for children to learn, it's really leading to confusion and exhaustion, and not able to really, and they took away the music, they took away all the artistic side of education. And
which proves they're scared to death of
yes,
children.
and math being raised, that they need to know more. They took away even cursive writing. I mean, it's just anything that could be creative and individualized in education, it's been erased.
So my question is, why aren't more people doing homeschooling? I mean, I agree with Gatto. He created homeschooling. He got it okay through the government. There's a lot of churches that are doing homeschooling through their churches, and I just wonder why there's anybody left in the school. The parents know better, so why do they put their kids there? And why isn't there more going on developing homeschooling and just finding someone that is capable of teaching? I've known many parents that just picked up the homeschooling books and just figured out how to do it themselves.
Yes.
And they didn't have any great education or anything. They just, there's books that show how to do it. Why aren't more people doing that? And if it's because the parents need to go to work, why aren't there people getting together and saying, okay, well, we could pay you to teach our children, and we'll work, but we're not going to send our children to work. A lot of people are doing that. Why aren't there more people doing that? That's what I wonder. Because
Yes.
many people know it's wrong, and many people don't want their kids in systems where the kids are fighting. They don't want their children getting hurt at school. And so that's why a lot of people have moved up from LA and San Francisco and brought them up into Chico and Paradise to have a safer environment in school. It's still the same things going on in school. But there is an option. There's homeschooling. Why aren't more people doing it? And in the homeschooling method, see, the parent gets to be the teacher and choose how to develop the curriculum. And there can be so much creativity in any subject. The way you teach math or the way you teach social science can be so creative. You can just be taking field trips all the time. They can be wonderful.
Yes.
If you're not stuck to those stupid textbooks that are just making you memorize a few paragraphs and then taking tests and learning mathematical formulas and taking tests. And that's not what we need to be doing right now. We just need to be expanding consciousness. We'd be better off just, sending your children to these new schools, these schools of enlightenment, these quantic schools of learning technology, of raising your consciousness. And then you regain the mind of God, and then you don't need school. That's what I'm trying to promote. I'm trying to create the Cosmic Mystery School of the Omniverse, teaching the parents to be guiding their children in learning more and more about this consciousness fields and tuning into it and tuning into their spiritual self, removing this polarity of the physical and spiritual, and learning that there's so much out there. And they aren't going to put that in textbooks ever. That is something that's going to be outside of the government, outside of the education. And they're going to think of it, they're always going to think of spirituality as something that's only belongs in the church. Spirituality has to be combined with education. Spirituality just means what we can't see yet. That has to be in education. Just the education can't just be based on the Hertzian level of what we perceive now. It can't be based on the five senses, because reality is beyond the five senses. It's the other set of senses of knowing. So it's wonderful that the Asian education has that in it. So at least half of our world is getting that aspect. combining the physical and the spiritual, and always, I think they listen to their higher selves. They're very in tune with the knowing, the telepathic, and they'll probably have telepathic communication with aliens much earlier than the Western half of the world does, because we can't even conceive of it. We just, our telepathic communication is pick up that telephone. We're a nation with people, they probably look down at us and they think everybody has a telephone stuck to their ear. It's like, we don't
Our new body part.
Our telepathic communication is this thing we stick on our ear. We have to get out of that. So people want to communicate, obviously, continuously, and I think that telephone has created a false sense of security. I notice people just can't be away from their telephone 2 seconds anymore. So that seems like something planted by the fallen angelics too. Something making people feeling more isolated.
Yeah, it really does makes you more isolated, in a sense, because it's such a paradoxical experience, because you would think that you're connected to everything, but by itself, it separates you from everything. You lose your way of communicating. Children don't talk to each other anymore. They text. Well, phone call is outdated as well. I think we're just switched to text messaging. So even we took out the voice and the intellect out of it, because it's becoming a broken language and a broken communication. And so where do you see the way out of it? How can we turn our education system around?
I don't think it has anything to do with the education system. I think it has to do with the sun. You know what happens to you when you go lay in the sun? You start seeing these blue spheres. Well, that sun is going to get more and more intense. It's going to be sending more and more of the consciousness from our original sun Alcyon, which is bringing our original consciousness back to Earth. Because we are actually, the Earth is actually from sun Alcyon. It is from the Andromeda galaxy. It's not even from this galaxy.
So if you could go into deeper into that for our viewers. So how many star systems do we have?
Well, originally, these star systems, there were 12 star systems. Not originally. They had to create star systems, 12 star systems, to get us back into alignment. Everything is getting us back into alignment with sun Alcyon. We were created by sun Alcyon, the eighth sun of the Andromeda galaxy. And so we are from the Aquarius matrix. We are the Aquarian race. And that star that sun Alcyon created blew up and was scattered into the Milky Way galaxy. And in order to put our consciousness back that came from sun Alcyon, there have been many million years of realigning suns and realigning consciousness to bringing a consciousness back into this Earth so that we can realign back with the sun Alcyon. And part of that alignment was placing us in this new omniverse with 12 suns that realign us back into sun Alcyon, because those 12 suns were the pieces containing the consciousness. So they're putting all these pieces of our consciousness back together so we can go back to sun Alcyon, because we had a frequency fence put around the Earth so we couldn't align the crystal heart of Earth into the crystal heart of sun Alcyon. That frequency fence is coming off now. Between 2012 to 2017 is when that frequency fence is being removed, and it's when these stellar wave activations from the sun, bringing the consciousness of sun Alcyon, and sun Ra is also a part of this. Sun Ra is actually the father, the guardian of this whole system. So through the consciousness of sun Ra, the consciousness of sun Alcyon, flowing through our sun, so that consciousness is coming as light waves, this stellar wave activations. And scientists have even have pictures of now the sun is emitting positrons, and they had never seen a positron before 2013. They noticed the sun was emitting positrons. Positron is an energy that removes the polarity of the electron-proton. It removes polarity. It makes the electron-proton into this entity that is higher than the neutron and higher than the omnion. It goes beyond the reverse polarity. And so the sun is actually spraying this new chemical substance, this light energy that removes polarity.
So, and that's what's awakening the consciousness? That's what rising the consciousness
It is beginning, it is removing polarity. And a lot of people talk about removing polarity, left brain, light, right brain, male, female, good, bad. That's not what removing polarity means. What the removing polarity is removing the illusion of the physical and spiritual being two different things,
yes.
Visible and visible. It's only invisible because we've had this frequency fence put over us that makes it seem invisible. So removing the invisibility, you notice when you lay in the sun, you're starting to see orbs and sparkles, and you said that you saw like a ray
yes.
fish kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. You're seeing a new reality. You're seeing something that was invisible before. Removing the polarity means removing that veil that wasn't allowing you to see the invisible before. So the more of the sun, and if you notice it's getting more intense every time you go in the sun, yes. You'll see more of these spheres, you see more light popping, and then you get to the point you go in the sun and you come back into the room and then you start seeing all of that light and sun in the room too. It's removing the polarity. The invisible is becoming visible. And in reality, we live inside of that sun. So the illusion that has to be removed is all of this, what we think we see out there, it's just mm-hmm. that sun is going to move closer and closer until we are back inside of that sun. And we are now being wrapped inside this plasma ship, actually 48 plasma ships. So the plasma light energy of the sun is just wrapping the earth, penetrating the earth, removing that polarity through light, through the plasma light. And it's a very etheric, spiritual light. It's thermal plasma, ectoplasma, all this electrotonal magnetic fields of energy, this light energy is just breaking down this barrier between visible and invisible. And pretty soon, we're just going to see the light. You're seeing it happen. Every time you go in the sun, there's more and more of that light. Well, by 2017, everywhere you look, you're just going to see the sun. By 2022, there's going to be so much sun that you realize you're inside the sun. And that removal of polarity is making us at one with spiritual reality.
So that's what they speak of, being one with the spirit.
So it just means returning these frequencies. And what I'm interested in, the multidimensional communication means bringing back the actual morphogenetic fields, the consciousness fields of energy. And that's what indigo children are. Indigo children are entities that are born on Earth from the pre-light, pre-plasma, pre-light and sound fields. That means beyond the 14th dimension, before light and sound, pre-light and pre-sound. So it's a frequency. So I'm an indigo who loves frequencies. I sing frequencies. I create meditations with frequencies. And my consciousness is connected to that pre-light and sound field. They're called the Kira She. It's Kaharasa Tahala would be the 12th dimensional frequencies, and the Maharata Mueva Kira She Hasha. Kira She Hasha is pre-light and sound. So the Kira She were the suns, the golden sun, the blue sun, and the violet sun. So those are the pre-light and sound suns. Those were the suns that indigos were born from. And they came to Earth over the last 100 years, bringing more and more of these frequencies. But then in between 2000 and 2012, there were a higher level of these indigo children brought to Earth that already had 48 DNA strands already activated. And indigos are to pull us into six-dimensional. Indigos have a six-dimensional DNA strand activated. So they're raising us, and you always have to go one, so the sixth level indigos are pulling us into the fifth dimension. So it's their frequency needed here to pull us into this fifth dimension. And so it's all about their frequencies of consciousness. So why are the education systems trying to make children stupider now? Why are they drugging students? Why are they isolating the attention deficiency students? Those students, that they've labeled, they seem to be attention deficient because they're indigos that are a much higher level consciousness that don't need the stupidity being taught in their classroom, and they're going to refuse it because they know better. And education is going to make it just harder and harder on these children. And they're scared to death. They know their time is over. They know it. They know it as well as I know it.
So in the fifth dimension, it's really truly when we're going to connect to our true nature. So it's going to be, the best way to describe it, it's going to be less trying. Things going to be easier to manifest. It's more of a becoming more spirit-like than physical-like. And living life from that probably going to remove the struggle, the illusions of that life has to be hard.
Exactly. Because that's an illusion.
It is an illusion. And the belief structure going to change as well.
Totally.
So
education will disappear.
Yes, education will disappear. Yes, politics will
disappear. By 2030, it will be gone. 2040, 2030, we're going to be getting on spaceships.
Yes.
Bye-bye, education.
Because really, when you can read each other's minds, there's no need for rules. There is no walls between you and I, or religion or politics. So it's really the rules are set to really control society who's consciously not evolved. But in the same time, it complicates things because it limits you. And so shifting to that dimension, how are reality going to change in your opinion?
Fifth dimensional reality, it's mainly about what I talked about before, about we're cut off at this third chakra.
So our chakra system going to change as well, because
our chakras are blooming, like lotus flowers, and they're blooming. More of this sun energy and this liquid light energy that we absorb into our body, the more these lotus flowers are going to blossom. And then when the seventh lotus blossom blossoms, then we're no longer in the five senses, we're in the seven senses of the knowing. The seven senses of knowing is all knowing. So we'll just be in knowingness. Like, experience in Asia, they're a little bit in that knowingness. Nothing like the way it's going to be, but that knowingness creates a different kind of a harmony, a different kind of relationship than you have in the not knowingness, where you're this education, and education is like fighting for its life because it's all about the five senses, all reading, writing, arithmetic. There's not any reading, writing, or arithmetic in the all-knowing. There's a spiritual geometry, sacred geometry.
Yeah, where creation is going to be much easier is that you don't have to go to school to learn to be an architect.
Well, learning it is a little difficult because I've been going through the learning. The best example of it is the School of Enlightenment, Ramtha School in Yelm, Washington. His students, they begin with learning to be in tune with their blue body by using this candle and activating their full spectrum of light. And then they go to the next step of becoming one with their spiritual self through the mirror. And then they get into the mind of God when the room goes black. And then what is fascinating, when you get into that mind of God, his students can take a deck of cards and read the back, because when your mind works away, the numbers from the back
you don't need eyes.
they rise up. But that's just showing you how the mind really works? Because your spiritual body is in the back of you. You become one. And if you want to know something, your spiritual body will rise up and tell you, here's the answer. And he has trained his students to take a card, and the back of the card will rise up and you can see the numbers in the back. So his students can just read, an entire deck of cards. And his students are making a lot of money at the Jingle Balls casinos. They can just read the whole deck of cards. But see, that's the kind of freedom. We're supposed to have this 360-degree consciousness that knows everything, sees everything. And his students also, he's spent so much time training his students. They keep blindfolds on, and they walk through these fields, and they write something on a card. It's a symbol, and they're connecting their consciousness to this oneness. They're removing space and time. So they have this card on their forehead, and they have to go through this field about 100 feet to find that same card. They're blindfolded, but what they're doing is they're removing space and time. They're connecting that symbol with that symbol and making it align, and your body just can magnetize to it. These are the kinds of things that we can do. We can just walk around blindfolded, because through our symbolic consciousness, through our frequency-specific mind, we know where it is. Like I said, where did I put our key? You ask for knowing, it's over there. You don't have to be looking all over the house for your keys anymore. You just know. But I think Ramtha School is a real good sign of how hard the work is, how much practice you have to do to get to that point. They have a bow and arrow, and they start hitting a bullseye blindfolded. That's who we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be able to blindfold, pick up a bow and arrow, and hit a bullseye every time. We're supposed to be blindfolded and find that card in the field. So that's a good example.
So that's
of
our potential.
The training, the potential. But these people train for 30 years to learn to do this. Some of these high indigos go to the school. They can do it the first day, and it just blows everybody's minds. And that proves the potential of a full indigo child that already has their 6 DNA strand activated. So what we're going to is this new being that has all this DNA activated and all this knowingness activated. Our chakras and lotus blossoms, all of them are blooming, and it's that sun's energy coming in and activating. And the thing that I mostly see the sun doing is it's turning on our midbrain, which is the pineal gland.
Yes.
If you are totally living in the pineal gland, it removes space and time. So walking around blindfolded helps activate that removal of space and time. And seeing the back of the card is removing space and time. So it's all about removing polarity.
Interesting when you said that, that pineal gland being activated. When I was sun gazing for 3 months, when they took an X-ray of my brain, I had this water around my pineal gland, and I had...
That's really interesting, because that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be bringing this liquid light energy from the crystal lava flows, which means the 12th level consciousness, coming in as liquid light energy, breathing it into our crystal cells, especially our pineal gland. We're supposed to be wrapping it in the spiritual water, and that's what's transforming the body. And so a doctor can actually see that in an X-ray. That's amazing.
Yeah, but they couldn't put any knowledge behind. They said, I don't know why you have so much water around your pineal gland, but you have a water bubble around it. And I'm like, oh, good. Then the sun gazing works.
And did your mind feel different before and after you had that water bubble?
Well, that's when I had my symptoms of not able to walk and really dizzy.
You're going through your ascension symptoms.
Yes, I did not know what I was going through, but yes, I was. So that's why I was in the hospital, to try to figure out why I lost the ability to walk and why I'm so dizzy and nauseous and stuff like that.
These are all common ascension symptoms. So if you're getting dizzy, if you have headaches,
horrible migraines,
terrible
yes.
migraines, those are ascension symptoms. That means the sun is working on transforming your body. And not only that, we're actually, our light bodies are being taken up into the plasma ships, and they're operating on us. We're going into inner earth. There's ascension teams that are preparing our bodies, activating our DNA. All of this stuff is going on that most people are totally unaware of. And it's mostly going on in the indigo children. And the indigo children, when they're born, they can't be born with their DNA activated, but they're
so
born,
they have to do the work.
They're born with the potential of it activating really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So these indigo children will have their DNA strands activated by the time they're 12 years old. Mm-hmm. So it's not like something they have to know. They brought these children from the pre-light and sound fields into Earth to raise these frequencies very quickly. Mm-hmm. And I mean, indigo children are people that have been born over the last 100 years.
Are you an indigo?
Oh yeah, I'm an indigo. Yeah, my whole thing all my life has been to break down that polarity and know that there's something else. And it's always been about these frequencies. I was also a music major, so I also have a master's degree in music. And I was always interested in putting the music and the communication together, which is what my mission as an indigo on Earth is. I am from the violet flame, and the pre-light, pre-sound fields of the blue sphere and the emerald gold sphere and the violet sphere. The violet sphere indigo children on Earth have this special relationship with dolphins. The dolphins are from the violet flame, and the dolphins are here to hold this sonic wave pattern with the Earth while this ascension is going on. So I am very into the frequencies and maintaining this attunement with these higher spheres. And so everything I do is connecting my consciousness and inhaling frequencies and recording frequencies. So I record frequencies. I do meditations, and I record the frequencies of consciousness with the meditations. And then I create this frequency music that just attunes people to this new reality, changing us, removing that polarity, bringing us into at one with our Christic consciousness and with our Kira Shea, pre-light and sound consciousness, activating the body. So it's all about the frequencies. Indigo children are all about frequencies.
So tell me about the number 12. Number 12 is popping up whenever you talk about the 12 stars, when we talk about the 12 apostles of Christ, the 12 stargates, the 12 notes on the keyboard. I mean, it's just that number is constantly coming up. Is there any meaning behind that?
There are 12 stargates. The Earth originally had 12 stargates. That's what the Earth had before the frequency fence, and they started all these distortions and breaking up the crystal seals and everything. There's 12 stargates in the Earth, and those 12 stargates, each one of them opens to a family of consciousness, these 12 families of consciousness. And it's the Palladorians that are creating this new consciousness, this higher level being on the Earth and with the Earth, so that all of the beings that have ever been associated with all of these omniverses can once again have their angelic consciousness return to them, because there's been so many race lines that have been destroyed or tampered with because fallen angelics invaded them and then pulled a lot of them into these phantom matrices things. And they're restoring this consciousness, and the restoration had to happen through these indigo children who had high enough frequencies to hold these portals, hold these stargates steady while this Earth was going through the shift. Because if they couldn't hold these portals steady and reactivate these 12 stargates, then it was possible for the fallen angelics to maybe take hold of the Earth and shifted into the family matrix. So we've needed these indigo children activating these Stargate portals on the earth, holding earth steady. So indigos, some indigos have a mission of like holding a specific Stargate, and some of us, my mission, what I have been told to do, my starry brother from Sirius B said, I am here for just holding the grids of Northern California. And
so all these children are spread around the world, around probably the stargates, to hold that frequency.
Right. And a lot of them like to just be where that Stargate is, but some of us were given different missions. Like I was told that I'm supposed to be holding the grids of Earth steady to align with the cloud cities, the crystal cities, the islands of light. So as the Earth, I said Earth became more and more dense, so we're spreading back up into the cloud cities, so we're rising, so we're like climbing the stairway to heaven. And so there has to be, the Earth has to be held steady and in alignment. So these frequencies, like if you think of all of our neural nets in our bodies and how many of them are, and if you think of that lining up clear, up through the cloud cities and up into the universe. And so it's these entities working on this alignment. It's a really big job. I mean, there's zillions of consciousness alignments for each individual, and they're working on this continuously. And as long as we keep our frequencies high and help them making these connections, we're moving forward. But every time we take a couple of steps backwards by hating something or starting another war, we have to start it all over again. It's an incredibly complex thing.
And that is that, what you mentioned, hating or starting a war. Anytime when you have a negative emotion, these fallen angelic actually live off of that.
Exactly.
They live off of that frequency. So that's what, the majority of public has to understand. Why hatred cannot be killed with hatred. It only feeds it. It can only be, the fire only can be put out by water. And in this case, that's love.
And liquid light, lava,
yes.
Christ level 12 dimensional consciousness flowing into us and flowing into our pineal gland and changing us from the inside. And it's going to happen. What's going to happen by 2017, those of us that have been in tune with it and wanted and doing it are going to get on the fast track and go on and be able to start orbiting to Tara and Gaia and just see a different reality. And the Shambhala of inner Earth, that frequency fence that was placed over the Earth 12,000 years ago will be lifted, which means the gates to the inner Earth will be lifted. And that's going to start happening about 2017. And so those of us that are in tune with these higher frequencies will be seeing Earth turning into Shambhala and be seeing the entities from inner Earth, and we'll be able to see the spaceships land. And those who just refuse to believe it's true, like people that are now taking pictures of spaceships and still don't believe it, when it's going on, they just still won't believe it. They'll be just living in a different reality.
Well, the problem is that, the belief has a self-reinforcing mechanism in it. It's only visible to those who truly accept it to be true. So if you don't believe something to be true, it's not visible to you.
So it goes back to that time in Korea.
Yes.
I will see the spaceships and they won't see the spaceships, just like the Koreans couldn't see me.
Yes.
Just like that. So I know that was a gift given to me, the thing that happened in Korea. They just wanted me to. Everything that's happened to my life has been me. Before you're born, you write out this journey, this mission that will make you remember, because you know that you're going to have amnesia. So you put these steps ahead of you that's going to lead you back on that mission to remember who you are. And so everything that's happened to me. Oh, and I wanted something in multicultural studies that was the most important thing I learned. There's a thing called culture shock. When you go into a different culture and you live there for a couple of years, and then you kind of go through this culture shock, but then when you come back to your original culture, you go through a bigger culture shock because it makes you able to see something you couldn't see before. And that is an eye-opener. And that culture shock, and if you travel to different countries a lot, you go through that culture shock over and over and over again. So I went through culture shock maybe 20 or 30 times, and that's what opens consciousness.
Yes, it really does.
And that's why some people have not opened their consciousness, because they've never left their hometown.
Yes, I had that happen. I was at a party one time, and this older lady, she was probably had a couple of glasses of wine, and I think at the time Ukraine was going through another turmoil, and she was asking me if I'm following the news or do I feel for my people. And I said, well, you know, I don't really follow politics, and I kind of live in my own bubble, and I prefer to, you know, to be there. And then she got really, really upset with me, saying that, well, if you don't feel you're for your people, I will, because, you know, shame on you that you don't feel the pain and you are not da-da-da-da-da-da. The woman didn't even know my name, so I didn't really know how to react to it at first. I mean, it was somewhat offensive because it was hurtful that someone attacks you for something that you choose not to believe or not to participate. And so I thought about it a little bit, and I walked up to her and I said, well, have you been in any third world countries? And she said, no. Have you been in Russia or in Ukraine? She said, no. So how can you relate to these people? And she says, well, I was reading, you know, Russian poetry. So that really shocked me, and I'm thinking, wow. So let me look at this. And I look at her and I said, you know what? I lived history. You don't have to tell me how I should feel about people, because I lived in Russia. So really, me choosing to live in a different reality based upon experience, not upon reading on a culture that you have no relation to. So, and then that's where I think judgment comes in, that I think everyone should travel and experience what is it like to be in a third world country. What is it like to be in a different westernized country?
There's a problem. When also I was writing a lot of books in those days, and what I always saw, I would never say that, because most of the people I talked to that did travel a lot didn't know anything about other countries. It didn't change them in the least, because most people, when they travel, they stay in their narrow spectrum of their reality. They stay at these 5-star hotels. They really never interact. And I found that it was even worse with people who studied the language. When they really got good at the language of the place they were going to, and they just kept studying this language and getting the grammar right, and then they just like create these little situations where they could have these little conversations with the people, and then they felt like they knew the culture so well. They didn't know the culture. They just knew it.
They knew the textbook part.
Yeah, they knew a grammar book, and that was something I learned in both Korea and Japan. There were people that had studied Korean extensively. You know, they were in the military, they were translators and stuff. And I was working for the Korean military, training the security guards for the Korean president. And the people, the military people, were always laughing at these Americans that thought they knew Korean so well. They said, you know, this guy thinks he speaks Korean, but it's really hilarious, the things he's saying. And so I never wanted to learn the Korean language, because I knew whatever I did, no matter how well I could speak English, Korean, I knew it would always be wrong. It was just like there's so many nuances and so many things you can never know about a culture. And it's just the same as in English. You know, people don't realize how often they insult each other, how that has so many different meanings, what they're saying. And so I learned that it was kind of dangerous to learn the language. So I always only learned very minimal language, things that couldn't possibly harm a relationship, because it was very easy to create enemies with words. That's how all wars are created. They're created through misunderstandings. So people think they've had an intercultural experience, and they really didn't learn anything.
Yeah, I think it's just having an open mind when you go to a new country, and respecting their culture, and look at it from an open mind without judgment of what they are.
That knowing, that absorbing,
yes,
just knowingness, and
yes,
saying, wow,
and appreciation for it. I think
you feel it, and you
yes,
see what you're doing, and then they bring you into their family. And
yes, that's when you can really
live. And,
yes,
and like the Japanese invited my husband to make mochi with them. So they have all that rice out there, and they're pounding rice with their grandparents all day, and just how the families work together, and just getting to know those things, what they really feel, what they really cherish.
Yes, I completely agree that we cannot learn culture from textbook, and we cannot learn culture from a 5-star hotel perspective. That's not cultural immersion, no.
So these people say, "Oh yeah, I traveled all over the world. I am so cultural."
Yes, that's a very different perspective. That's being on the surface. But anyhow, well, thank you very much. Do you want to say anything in conclusion regarding education and regarding the interdimensional communication?
We're just all getting ready to get on a spaceship, so it's time to start learning some kind of communication.
Yes, I think it's just being open.
Tuning in.
Yes, being open to the shift. And
removing judgmentalism, and removing all of these ideas that this culture is better, because that just all came from these textbooks. We were all brainwashed, and we've been being brainwashed about spaceships landing too. All these movies that have been coming out over the years, and creating all this fear, and people just scared to death. And you mentioned that you're afraid of seeing beings appearing in front of you, so there's this fear of different. Different, yeah. Yes. So that has to be conquered, because if you have the fear, they're not going to let them see you, because they don't want to scare us. They really don't want to. They only want to appear to those of us who really want it, and just working on it night and day and want nothing more than it. And that's who they're going to appear to first. And going to be making plans with our government for their landing. They're going to start making plans with our government by 2022. Open communication.
Yes, that's when the quarantine going to be lifted between us and the entire power.
And we talked about what the quarantine was, the frequency fence.
Yes.
The frequency fence also means that the inner earth doors can be opened.
And if anyone has any doubt about that textbook or outdated information, I mean, when you read history or even science, we're still teaching our kids the Newtonian physics way out. I mean, it's just that it's looking reality. I mean, it has some truth to it, but it's a very different perspective, a very limited perspective what reality is, and not counting in the observer, because when Newton was writing the books and his philosophy, he did not know that actually the observer has an effect on its environment. Exactly. That's the key, that someone who's watching the apple fall has the ability to change reality. Exactly. There's a term in intercultural communication, the imic and the edit. The outsider looking in on a culture. The people in the culture are locked in this box, and you can't see anything. You can't even see what's going on in your own culture. But the outsider looking at it sees a whole different reality. And I had a problem writing books about other cultures, because they would say, well, how can you know? You're not one of us. Well, the funny thing is, you can see more as an outsider looking in. You will never know what you look like. And that's where the belief structure really lies, that when a belief really becomes part of a culture, it becomes invisible. Exactly. And only the outsider who doesn't have that belief can see that. Exactly. So that's a very interesting, view on that. And what was the two words for that?
Epigenetic.
Wow.
Insider, outsider view.
Fascinating.
That's what creates cultural perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what has to be healed.
Yes.
And when the other entities from other planets are landing, same thing. Mm-hmm. They're seeing something totally different. They see us as light. Mm-hmm. They're watching us.
Well,
all
they
the
see
time.
our energy structure. So it's not...
they're like, you don't have to worry about them watching you do private things because they just see you as light. They might see some lights flickering because you're doing something, but they just see you as light. And hopefully soon we'll just see each other as light, and it'll be a lot easier that way.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for coming again, and I will see you next time. I would love to have you on a different topic because it's always been fascinating to talk to you because you have so much wisdom to share with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.